In this video, we're going to start introducing the vocabulary of PL and then showing what the different parts of the vocabulary mean by showing how to put them into a symbolization key. And then we're going to look at some fairly simple sentences of PL that are called atomic sentences. So, first thing to say is that PL contains SL. It contains all of the sentential connectives of SL, contains the parentheses. We're eventually going to adopt the same uh, informal conventions as an SL about using square brackets, dropping external parentheses, etc., etc. PL also contains sentence letters, although we don't really use them very much in PL, right? We have, better ways of forming sentences. Now, in ordinary language, when we're talking about objects, right, context determines which objects it is that we're talking about. So, for example, suppose that speaker, angrily says, "You left me all the dishes." Right? This does not refer to like all the dishes in the world, right? It refers to the dishes in the particular home or apartment or house or wherever where the speaker is. It's those particular dishes that the speaker is referring to, and that's something that is determined by the context. Likewise, if you have an instructor in an in-person class, right, and the instructor says everyone passed the midterm, what that means is everyone in that class passed the midterm. It doesn't mean everybody in the entire world passed the midterm. It doesn't mean everyone in some other class passed the midterm, unless that's something that's been specified by the instructor, right? It means that, the context of that utterance establishes that by everyone, what the instructor means is everyone in that class. Um, okay, in PL, we don't just rely on muddy, vague things like context. What we do is, in order to establish what objects you're talking about, we define what's called a universe of discourse, which is also often referred to as a domain. And this is a non-empty set of objects, and we just specify that these are the objects that we're talking about. It has to be non-empty, right? You can't have the empty set. You're not allowed to just go on talking about nothing in PL. So, for example, right, you left me all the dishes, right? In PL, we would specify be something like things in my apartment, right? Everyone passed the midterm, right? We would specify that the universe of discourse here would be people enrolled in Phil 120-850, winter 2024, University of Alberta. I mean, we didn't actually have a midterm, but still, you get the idea. Okay, so having laid out how that works, we can look at the next set of, or part of the vocabulary of PL. These are individual terms, and there are two types in PL. First are what are called individual constants. These are lowercase a through v. They can have integer subscripts, so that you have infinitely many of them. And what individual constants do is each one names exactly one object in the universe of discourse. So you can't have ambiguous constants where it's not clear what object that they name. Um, you can't have ones that refer to something outside of the universe of discourse. You can't have ones that refer to more than one object in the universe of discourse. You can have more than one constant that refers to the same object, but you can't have a constant that refers to more than one thing. Um, A second type of individual terms are what are called individual variables. These are lowercase w through z. These can also have integer subscripts. And these range over objects in the universe of discourse. We'll look a little bit later at how these work. We should talk about the meta variables that we use for talking about PL. And remember, of course, these are meta variables. They're not part of the language PL. These are part of the meta language that we're using for talking about PL. So pretty much the same as when we're talking about SL, we have boldface, P, Q, R, and S as meta variables that range over formulas of PL. Why we say formulas instead of sentences, we'll come back to that in a later video. We have boldface lowercase a as a meta variable that ranges over individual constants of PL. And we have boldface lowercase x as a metavariable that ranges over individual variables of PL. So we've got different metavariables for the constants and the variables. The distinction is really important. Okay, we're now in a position to start setting up a symbolization key. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to specify our universe of discourse. So we're going to say cities in North America. Now, one thing that's really important when you're establishing universe of discourse is it has to be clear what is in the universe of discourse and what is not in the universe of discourse. Right, that has to be something that's always very clearly specified, right? You have to be able to tell what objects are in it and what objects aren't. So the reason that I've picked cities in North America is because North America is something that's well defined, and cities, as far as I can tell, are well defined, right? It's clear what counts as a city and what doesn't, right? If I'd said something like settlements or urban areas in North America, then it becomes vague because the idea of, like, what is a settlement? As far as I can tell, this is not something that is well defined. There are going to be lots of things where we wouldn't be able to tell whether that counts, whether that is something that's in the universe of discourse or not. So cities in North America is well defined enough that we can use it as a universe of discourse. Then we're going to introduce three constants that name, right, things in the universe of discourse. So E, lowercase e, will stand for Edmonton, M will stand for Miami, U will stand for Utqiagvik. This here is a picture of Utqiagvik. It's on the shore of the Arctic Ocean in Alaska. So far, Lonely Planet has not included it on their list of the world's best beach destinations. Now note that in the symbolization key, we're assigning interpretations to individual constants. We don't assign interpretations to variables. Variables always range over any object in the universe of discourse, right? So you shouldn't have X, Y, W, things like this in your symbolization keys, right? Those don't get assigned interpretations. They're always ranging over everything in the UD. Okay. The next set of entities that we're going to look at as in PL are predicates. So PL contains n-place predicates. These are the capital letters A through Z. They can also have integer subscripts, and they're followed by n primes, officially speaking. So you have your 1' predicates, 2' predicates, 3, and then so on for any finite number of primes. What the primes do is the primes indicate how many individual terms the predicate applies to. So these are 1-term predicates, these are 2-term, 3-term, and so on and so forth for however any finite number of terms. However, I mean, officially, the predicates are defined as being followed by the primes, but we adopt the convention that whenever it's clear in the context how many terms the predicate has, you can omit the primes because they're awkward and ugly. And actually, the way that it works out is if you're using PL correctly, it will always be clear from the context how many terms the predicate has, which means you can always omit the primes. So let's add some predicates to our symbolization key. So we have a couple of 1-term predicates here, right? X has more than 1 million people. X has a professional sports team. A couple of 2-place predicates. X is north of Y. X is smaller than Y. And 3-place predicate. X is between Y and Z. The variables here in the symbolization key tell you where the blanks go in the predicate and how the blanks are related. And the other thing that they do is they tell you how many places there are in that predicate, right? So the fact that you have 2 variables in this statement here tells you that this is a 2-place predicate, which means you can omit the primes. Note that all the terms for a predicate go after it. So in X is north of Y, it's NXY rather than XNY. This is a standard convention. It's used in every form of symbolic logic. So we're now in a position to symbolize some simple sentences, which are called atomic sentences. Atomic sentences because they consist only of predicates and individual constants. So we'll start with Miami has a professional sports team. You have here this individual constant here, Miami, which is M, and a predicate has a professional sports team, that's P, so it's just going to be PM. Edmonton is north of Miami, right? You've got two constants here, Edmonton and Miami, so E and M, and then is north of is N, so it's going to be NEM. And remember that when you're using multi-place predicates, the order matters. So NEM means Edmonton is north of Miami, which is true. NME means Miami is north of Edmonton, which is false. Edmonton is between Utqiagvik and Miami, right? So here the predicate is X is between Y and Z, right? And we've got three constants here. So this is going to be BEUM, right? Edmonton between Utqiagvik and Miami. Now, because of the fact that PL contains SL, you can also form truth functional compounds of atomic sentences. So we'll look at a few of these. So here's a simple one, right? Utqiagvik is not between Edmonton and Miami. This is not BUEM, right? This is Utqiagvik is between Edmonton and Miami, and we just put a negation in front of it. Edmonton is smaller than Miami, but it has more than 1 million people. So Edmonton is smaller than Miami is going to be SEM, but remember is conjunction. And it has more than 1 million people will be, Edmonton has more than 1 million people, so that's going to be ME. So we will have, yeah, SEM and ME. Utqiagvik is north of Edmonton only if it is smaller than Edmonton. So Utqiagvik is north of Edmonton will be north of Utqiagvik, Edmonton, so NUE. It is smaller than Edmonton, smaller Utqiagvik, Edmonton, SUE. So, and then of course, only if, remember, is the conditional. So we have NUE implies SUE. So this is how PL talks about individual objects. And then in the next video, we're going to look at how it uses quantifiers to talk about everything in the universe of discourse.